three ways: that their eyes are directed towards him, that their ears are tuned into him, and that their hearts are comforted by him. Their eyes are directed towards him, their ears are tuned into him, and their hearts are comforted by him. Having come up the mountain into the presence of God in the glorious risen Jesus, to see him, to enjoy him, Jesus speaks. Jesus speaks and he points their eyes to him. He reveals something to them that perhaps they didn't know before. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Do you know what I think an element of the perfect Sunday, of our perfect gathering together should be? That when we come together, our gaze, our eyes are picked up, they are lifted up to Jesus. That we don't look at ourselves so much, we don't look so much at our problems and our struggles so much, but that our gaze is lifted up to him, the risen one, and we see and learn perhaps something new. We experience something new about who he is. If that's missing, then I think we're letting ourselves down. We're not experiencing the perfect Sunday. We're not coming into his presence and into his glory unless our gaze is filled with him and we're learning about him. Here he teaches them, he singles in, he hones in on this one true truth, that all authority is his. But I imagine that as we meet, regularly as we do, week by week, even day by day, having our gaze turned upwards, we should be seeking to see and to know and experience more and more of Jesus. First element, their eyes are directed towards him, but their ears are also tuned into him. And we explored this the very first week of 2022, who are we listening to? But let's not sort of neglect it and forget it and move on. There are so many people who could have been directing their lives, so many people whose words and whose authority could be shaping and changing the future direction of these disciples who are gathered. But they gather to Jesus, they see him, and their future is changed. Their lives are shaped, they are directed, they are instructed by him. He says to them, go. And he speaks those words to us. We've thought about that as well the second week in January. And he speaks other words to us. Because when we see who Jesus is, when we live and we experience his glory, when that is there right in front of us, it changes us, it challenges us, it shapes us, and it directs us. Not only do we want to see him, but we want to be transformed. We want our next day to be changed by encountering him. And that happens when our ears are tuned into his voice, when they're tuned into him, that our futures are shaped and changed by who he is. And then there's this last element, not just the eyes fixed and the ears tuned in, but the hearts comforted. Because very often when we receive instruction or when we recognize the enormity of who he is, we can feel small, we can feel powerless, we can feel insignificant, we can feel daunted. Jesus does not let them leave in that state. I think it is so wonderful that this is how the entire Gospel of Matthew is finished. This final speech of Jesus concludes. He says to them, and remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. Imagine the comfort that would have brought his followers as they face this daunting prospect of being the pioneers, of being the heralds, of being the ones who are stepping out into the danger zone, following his voice and rallying against the voices of all Jesus's opponents. Imagine the fear, the trepidation that they may have had. Jesus comforts them and says, remember, I am with you always, even to the very end of the age. Likewise with us. When we gather together and we see more of him, when our futures are are laid bare and changed by him, it can be a daunting prospect. It can be sometimes a crushing prospect, a fear-inducing prospect. And so a vital element of our perfect Sundays and our gathering together has to be this, where we leave comforted by Christ. Hearts warmed, not just challenged, but encouraged. A hope would be renewed in us, in who he is and what he has called us to do, and how he will be at work to those ends. So I think really that should be all of our framework for the perfect Sunday, of our gathering together. That our desires, our objectives, our expectations should be this, that we would ascend the mountain, that we would be coming into the presence and the glory of God in the risen Jesus. That when we encounter him, we worship, and these three things at least are happening. Our eyes would be turned towards him, our ears would be tuned into him, and our hearts would be comforted